Good day, everyone. So, our second module is entitled The Cell. This is Dr. Irvin R. Abrencillo. So, for our learning outcomes, first, trace the beginning of the discovery of the cell and the development of the cell theory. Second, identify the differences between animal cell and plant cell, and between prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cells. And third, describe the structure and functions of animal and plant cells. So before I continue this discussion, so I want you to take first the pre-assessment questions that are found in your module that is already uploaded in the CLID. Alright, so now that you are done with the answering of the pre-assessment, so let me continue with the discussion, beginning with the lesson 1, the development of the cell theory. So I know that you are familiar with this topic since this is not that new. I know that this was discussed during your junior high school, senior high school, or even in some of the topics in your beginning subjects during your first year of stay here in CEFI. So our body is made up of cells. So we all know that. So one of the characteristics of living things is that we are all made up of cells. So either the organism is unicellular or a multicellular organism. The point is all organisms are made up of cells. So our body is likewise made up of cells. So each of which is about 5,000 of a millimeter. So that's the size. It is too small to be seen by the naked eye, yet it contains practically all the information about you, your eye color, blood type, sex, and others. So there are a lot of things that are uh, found in the cell. Even the blueprint of our uh, of each organism is found in the cell, particularly in the DNA in the nucleus of the cell. Now, the invention of the microscope made possible the discovery of cells. So, the first lenses were used in Europe in the late 1500s by merchants who needed to determine the quality of cloth through the quality of thread and the precision of the weave. From these simple lenses, combination of lenses was put together. So the invention of lenses do not actually directed into the invention of the microscope. So the idea in the invention of the first ever lenses are for usually for business. And of course, it was later on used as a sort of eyeglasses. Then later on, scientists use this in order to invent something known as the microscope. Now, in 1665, English physicist Robert Hooke used of the first light microscope to look at thin slices of plant tissues. So these plant tissues are actually a slice of cork, which is already a dead part of the plant. So the one on the right, the picture on the right, was the picture or the actual cell that he saw during his time. So under the microscope, corks seem to be made of thousands of tiny chambers. So who called these chambers cells? So because they reminded him of a monastery's tiny rooms, which were also known as cells. So in that case, the microscope was already invented. But it was not mentioned that it was Robert Hooke, but it is a version of Robert Hooke's microscope that he used in 1665 that led to the discovery of the existence of the cell. Meanwhile, in the 1674, a Dutch businessman Anton van Leeuwenhoek became one of the first people to use a microscope to study nature. So using only a single powerful lens, Van Leeuwenhoek crafted instruments that could produce magnified images of very small objects. So his simple microscope enabled him to see things no one had ever seen before. So he was the first person to see tiny living organisms in a drop of water. So this water, actually, when viewed under the naked eye or using the naked eye, our eyes without any tool, this is just plain water. However, when he put this drop of water under the microscope and observed it, he was able to see tiny animals. So this led to the formation of microbiology as another branch of science. Now, in 1838, German botanist Matthias Sladen concluded that all plants are made of cells. And the following year, another German scientist, Theodor Schwann, concluded that animals are also made up of cells. And then Rudolf Virchow, a German physician, studied cell reproduction. And in 1855, he summarized years of research by stating where a cell exists, there must have been a pre-existing cell. Now, Matthias Claydon and Theodor Schwann um, did not just conclude all these things, but these are also the result of their research. That's why they said that plants are made up of cells, or animals are also made up of cells. By the way, when you speak of a pre-existing cell, it means that a cell would exist out of another cell, not out of any other things, but another cell. So with this, no, with this concepts presented by Matthias Schleiden, Theodor Schwann, and Rudolf Virchow, led to the formation of what we know as the cell theory. So these are the statements. First, all living things are composed of cells. During the time, the kingdom of organisms are just divided into two, the kingdom Animalia and kingdom Plantae. So that's why when they speak that all plants are made up of cells and all animals are made up of cells, they are referring to all living things are composed of cells. Cells are the basic units of structure and functions in living things. So as they observe the different activities, no, the different functions are carried out by the organism are all carried out inside the cell. So that means when we digest things, these are all delivered to cells. When we inhale oxygen, these are delivered to cells. When we exhale CO2, this came from the cells, and all other things that are performed by the cells. And of course, the last one is new cells are produced from existing cells. Because during the time, I think, no, there are people who believe that living organisms can exist out of non-living organisms. So with that, the cell theory, no, contradicted with such notion in stating that new cells are produced from existing cells. So that means that cells can only arise when there is an existing cell, and no cells will arise out of nothing or out of a non-living object. So let us now proceed to lesson 2, the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. I have here an illustration of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. So prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells are types of cells existing. So the different kingdoms of organisms are either be prokaryotic or eukaryotic cells. So the kingdom bacteria, under kingdom bacteria, you have there the Archaeobacteria and Eubacteria, and then kingdom Protist or kingdom Protista, and then kingdom Animalia, kingdom Plantae, and all these kingdoms of organisms are either classified as a prokaryotic cell or eukaryotic cell. Well, of course, basically the only prokaryotic cells are the bacteria. Either these are the Archaeobacteria or the Eubacteria. Now, as you can see here on the illustration, no, the one on the left is the prokaryotic cell, and the one on the right is the eukaryotic cell. So, in this lesson, we will just going to determine the differences and perhaps similarities of the two cells. Well, just to give you a background, um, based on the timeline of the organism, even in the evolution of organisms, the first one to exist are the prokaryotic cells, and eukaryotic cells were formed out of the evolution of the prokaryotic cell. So these are the some of the highlights of prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cell. So showing the differences of the two. So prokaryotic cell, they are unicellular, meaning they exist as a single cell. Meanwhile, most eukaryotic cells are multicellular. So that means that many kinds of eukaryotic organisms are multicellular organisms, just like humans, mammals, reptiles, and others. The size of the cell is generally small in prokaryotic cell, while it is large in eukaryotic cell. So meaning that the eukaryotic cell is larger than the prokaryotic cell. On the other hand, nuclear region is poorly defined due to the absence of nuclear membrane or the cell's lack true nucleus. Actually, this is the description of what prokaryotic cell is. No, the absence of the nuclear membrane, the one that encloses the nucleus in a eukaryotic cell. Meanwhile, in a eukaryotic cell, there is nuclear region, which surrounds the inner part of the nucleus containing the blueprint of an organism. In the prokaryotic cell, it contains a single chromosome. On the other hand, in eukaryotic cell, it contains more than one chromosome. It is nucleolus is absent in prokaryotic cell. Nucleolus is a part of the nucleus. Meanwhile, in a eukaryotic cell, it is present. There are also no organelles in the prokaryotic cell. So these are known as membrane-bound cell organelles. Examples are plastids, mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, and others. So these are not present in a prokaryotic cell. Meanwhile, it is present in a eukaryotic cell, both in animal cells and plant cell. When it comes with cell division, the ability for them to grow or to divide, um, for prokaryotic cell, it is only biomitosis. They do not reproduce sexually, so that's why they do not have meiosis. They are very simple organism. That's why they are unicellular. And then for the eukaryotic cell, cell division occurs by both mitosis and meiosis. And then examples of these prokaryotic cells are the bacteria, the blue-green algae. And for eukaryotic cell, you have there the kingdom fungi, plants, and animal cell. Now, these are the similarities, no? If you are going to look again on this illustration, you can identify actually the similarities. This one are the differences. This is in here we can be able to identify some of the similarities. For example, they both contain plasma membrane, the one that's surrounding the entire cell. They both have cytoplasm. They both have ribosome, as well as um, what do you call that? So cytoplasm, ribosome, and then there are a lot of differences. So the one that I have mentioned a while ago. All right. So including DNA, by the way, no. So there is DNA in prokaryotic cell, and there are also DNA in the eukaryotic cell. So let us now look into the third lesson, plant and animal cells. So structurally, plant and animal cells are very similar because they are both eukaryotic cells. So the same as with other cells under that are classified as eukaryotic cell. So they both contain membrane-bound organelles such as nucleus, mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, lysosomes, and peroxisomes. They also both contain similar membranes like cytosol, cytoskeletal elements, and the functions of these organelles are extremely similar between two classes of cells. However, there are also few differences that exist between plant and animal cells, and we are going to discuss that later on. So plant cells can be larger than animal cells. The normal range for an animal cell varies from 10 to 30 micrometers, while for a plant cell stretches from 10 to 100 micrometers. So you can actually associate the sizes of the cell, the plant and animal cell, when it comes with the texture of their body. No, well, animal cells' body are soft, while plants are not. Um, when it comes also with the body functions, you can associate that with the size of the cell. Beyond size, the main structural differences between plant and animal cells lie in a few additional structures found in plant cells. These are a chloroplast, the cell wall, and the large vacuoles. Well, the chloroplast, cell wall, and large vacuoles are associated with the kind of functions that the plant cells have. For example, plant cells are autotrophic. No, they perform photosynthesis. They manufacture their own food. So in order for them to do that, they need chloroplast because it contains pigments, no, like the chlorophyll, for them to be able to capture sunlight energy, in order for them to convert this energy with the help of carbon dioxide to become glucose or sugar that will become the food of the plants as well as food of other animals. And the cell wall, by the way, is a sort of protective layer of plant cells. Plants cannot defend themselves against any predator. So unlike animals that we can flee, we can fight any enemy around, but the plants cannot. So they need cell wall. And large vacuoles, storage of water, so they need water for photosynthesis. They cannot just go to the river and get water from it. So they cannot move unlike animals. All right. So these are the basic parts and functions of cells. So the principal parts or main parts of the cells are cell membrane, cytoplasm, and nucleus. So generally these are found among eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells have nucleus, they have cell membrane, and then the cytoplasm. So the one that you can see here in the illustration, no, the nucleus of the nucleus and the nuclear membrane, and then the one on the right also, no, are cells. So let's talk first about cell membrane. So the cell membrane is the outermost part of the cell. So the cell membrane is often pictured as fluid mosaic model. By the way, cell membrane can also be called as plasma membrane. Fluidity becomes its characteristic because its molecules are constantly moving. So the phospholipid bilayer actually, phospholipid because these yellow structures are lipids, no? So it has a head and a tail. And then since the plasma membrane is fluid, it can seal itself if it is damaged or broken. So the cell membrane allows the passage of um, substances in and out of the cell. It's just like a guard, no, in a school. So they allow the entrance and exit of students. Now, in here, it allows the entrance and exit of nutrients, of substances. So that's why they are known also as semi-permeable membrane. So another is nucleus. So the nucleus is covered with a membrane known as the nuclear membrane. So just like the cell membrane a while ago. So in here, it allows the passing in and out of substances in the nucleus. So the nucleus is also called as the control center. So it is control center because it contains the DNA. The DNA is the blueprint of an organism. So everything about how the organism will functions and other characteristics are encoded in the DNA. So that's making it as a control center. So the nucleus, which is part of the nucleus, is where the ribosomes are formed. And this structure can be found both in plants and in animals. So ribosomes are scattered in the cytoplasm of the cell, and some and there are also attachment in the endoplasmic reticulum. So later on, we are going to discuss that. So cytoplasm is a viscous fluid or jelly-like material where organelles are embedded. So its jelly-like features secure the organelles in plants and animals so that they remain in place. So because of the jelly material of the cytoplasm, the organelles do not just move from one place into another. So let us say that there will be no jelly-like material. So it will be very difficult for the organelles to function because they might keep on moving. So remember, organelles function for the welfare of the entire cell. So one organelle that may not be functioning well can actually damage the entire cell. Though the cells can be able to repair worn out organelles, they can also create new organelles. All right, so this is not actually cytoplasm, but this is mitochondria. I'm sorry for the heading. So the mitochondria are called the powerhouses of cells. Um, Let us just simply put it like the Meralco of the or the power plant, no, of the cell. Well, they are so called as powerhouses because they manufacture energy. So they are the one responsible for what we call as cellular respiration. So wherein the glucose, which is inside the cell, can be converted into adenosine triphosphate or the usable or the functional energy of the cell. So without mitochondria, even though we eat a lot of food, the food will not be converted to energy. So there are a lot of mitochondria in those places where energy is much more needed. For example, in humans, there are more mitochondria in the voluntary muscles than the involuntary muscles. Or it may be in both voluntary muscles, but there are more um, mitochondria on parts of the muscles where we usually use, unlike to those parts that are not constantly used. So because of the energy need. So meanwhile, this one is a vacuole. This is very small among animals. As I mentioned before, a vacuole serves as a storage area of the cell. It also store water. It can also store food and waste. Animals have a very small vacuole, while plants, as the producers through the process of photosynthesis, have a big central vacuole. So kailangan nila ng water, kailangan nila ng food, kailangan nakaka-produce din sila ng waste material. So that's why they have a very large vacuole. On the other hand, animal cells do not need much of the vacuole because whenever we are hungry, we can eat anytime. When we are dehydrated, we can drink, and we do not store much of our waste. We simply remove our waste from our body through our excretion. So in the plasmic reticulum, or known as ER, is a series of tunnels throughout the cytoplasm. So they transport protein from one part of the cell to another. That is why they are called as the transport center of the cell. So ER in plants and animals form a network of tiny canals through the cells. So they have the same functions in plants and in animal cells. So these canals are formed by two parallel membranes, and they connect the nuclear membrane and the plasma membrane, thus serving as passageway for food substances. So there's a need for such passageway because the products of one organelles may be needed in other cells. So they need to travel from one cell into another, or from one organelle into another. So there are two types of endoplasmic reticulum, the smooth and the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Of course, this is very basic. The smooth do not contain the ribosome, while the rough ER contains ribosome. So what are ribosomes? So they are protein factories. As mentioned a while ago, ribosomes are made in the nucleus of the cell, inside the nucleus. So these are very essential since all the functions and processes in plant and animal cell requires protein. So that's why one of the main material produced by the cells generally are protein. So even all the organelles inside the cells are made of a protein. So whenever there are worn out organelles, they are made, no, because they are also protein. So that's why ribosomes are very important. On the other hand, we have Golgi bodies, receive proteins and other compounds from the ER. So they package material and distribute them to the plant and animal parts of the cell. So there are parts that can also package whatever product there are in this inside the cell. So it is essential to pack all these things so that it can be properly distributed to the plant and animal parts of the cell. And of course, we have lysosome. Uh, it contains hydrolytic enzymes that can break things down. So lysosome pick up bacteria, if there are bacteria that will be able to enter the cell, food, and old organelles in plant and animal cells, and break them into small pieces that can be reused. So for example, there are worn out mitochondria, just like the one in the illustration. No, so the lysosome can be able to detect that it is already worn out. So the lysosome will engulf the old organelles, get the pieces that can be reused, and then dispose of those products that are no longer needed. Lysosome is also known as suicidal sac of the cells. No? So suicide suicidal because along the process, they also kill themselves. So, for example, they engulf a bacteria. So the bacteria will die, the lysosome will also die. But do not worry because, again, as I mentioned, the cell can be able to reproduce or produce those organelles that are already lacking in numbers. Now we have cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton is a series of fibers made from proteins. It provides structure to the cell and gives it shape. So the shape of the plants and the animal cells are like that because of the cytoskeleton. So there are different components of cytoskeleton. So we have microtubules, which are not found among plant cell. So it provides pathways for certain cellular movement molecules to move about, just as tracks are provided for railroad cars or trains. It is also found in structures like the cilia and flagella, which both aid in movement. So by the way, cilia and flagella are structures found outside the cell that are used for movement. So flagella is very visible in sperm cell, and cilia are very visible among muscle cells, or even in the lining of our stomach or in the lining of our other organs. So for example, the cells that line your windpipe use cilia to sweep foreign materials from the lungs. Sperm cells use flagella to move. Okay, so it is also involved in cell division as mitotic spindle. So if you will remember your mitosis cell division, so the formation of mitotic spindle. So another components of um, cytoskeleton is intermediate filaments, which are again absent in plants. So since they are the most stable component of the cytoskeleton, they are found in durable structures such as hair, scales, and fingernails. So they also help provide structure to the nuclear envelope. So they are very stable. And if you'll notice the examples of the intermediate filaments, hair, scales, and fingernails are all tough, no? Tough parts of our body or in the body of animals. Microfilaments, on the other hand, are pipe-like structures and help provide shape and movement for the cell. Of course, the cells need to retain its shape, no? And also the movement of it. So examples of microfilaments are found in muscle cells. All right. So another one is cell wall. So cell wall is not present among animal cell. So it is composed of cellulose. Cellulose is a uh, sugar, a polysaccharide sugar. It is actually the cellulose that gives shape to the plant cell. So the cell wall consists of several distinct layers. So as I mentioned, it is needed by the plants to protect itself. So the primary cell wall is the outer layer. It expands as the cell grows. As the plant reaches its full size, the secondary cell wall develops inside the primary cell wall. So how rigid or how tough the cell wall is, we cannot actually digest cell wall. So that's why humans like us, when we eat plants, when we eat vegetables, no, when we defecate the one that we eat. So andun pa din. So the last one is centriole. Centrioles are paired organelles found only in animal cell. So this is used in the formation of the spindle fiber during the cell division. They are located together near the nucleus at right angles to each other. So that ends our discussion. So as I mentioned, this is just, I think, a recall of your basic biology. So we need this in order for us to understand better the next modules, no? So that's why we need to discuss the basic of biology, the cell. So thank you so much for watching, and please submit your activities on time. Thank you.